Welcome to Slumber Legacy, where stories from the past drift softly into the night. Tonight, we remember someone whose life left a mark, even if you sleep through most of it. Let's begin. Jesse Woodson James was born on September 5, 1847, in Clay County, Missouri, a place known for farms, rolling hills, and eventually gunfights. But on the day he was born, it was quiet. Just dirt and babies and wind. His father, Robert James, was a Baptist minister. He left the family to join the California gold rush and naturally died shortly after arriving. That left Jesse, his older brother Frank, and their mother Zerelda. Yes, Zerelda. It's a name you won't hear much anymore, unless you meet a horse. Jesse grew up on a farm, probably doing things kids did in the 1800s, like feeding animals, staring at corn, and waiting for the Civil War, which eventually came. Missouri was what you'd call a border state, meaning half Union, half Confederate, and entirely confusing. Families split, neighbors argued, and teenagers like Jesse and Frank had to pick sides. They picked the Confederate side, which made things morally complicated. Frank joined a Confederate guerrilla group known as Quantrill's Raiders. Jesse was a little young, but don't worry. He caught up. These weren't just soldiers. These were guys who burned towns, raided farms, and did things most textbooks like to skip. They were very good at violence and very bad at making friends. By the time Jesse was a teen, he joined up with a similar group led by Bloody Bill Anderson, who, despite the nickname, was not known for his soft skills. Jesse got shot in the chest at 16. That's not normal, but it's what happens when your hobbies include ambushing Union patrols. He recovered at home, possibly on a straw mattress, probably with a lot of quiet resentment. That resentment would turn into something else, a lifelong desire to rob banks. Because why not? And that is just the beginning. After surviving a chest wound as a teenager, Jesse James didn't decide to become a librarian or a baker. No, he chose a slightly more dangerous hobby: robbing banks and trains. Because, well, why not? The years following the Civil War were chaotic. Missouri was a mess of tensions, grudges, and broken fences. Folks who fought on different sides didn't exactly swap Christmas cards. Instead, they swapped gunfire, threats, and sometimes a polite, "Move along, mister." Jesse and his older brother Frank formed a gang with a few other like-minded gentlemen. This group was called the James Younger Gang. The gang's business model? Rob banks, stagecoach companies, and trains. A risky business, but one that paid in horseshoes, gold coins, and the occasional bullet hole. They weren't just common criminals. To some, they were folk heroes. Robin Hoods? Maybe. But Robin Hood was fictional. Jesse James was very real, with a mustache to prove it. Their first major robbery was in 1866, in Liberty, Missouri. It was, let's say, a modest success. They escaped with some cash and the town's attention. Over the next decade, their daring exploits grew bolder. They robbed a train in Adair, Iowa, in 1873, holding passengers at gunpoint, but politely reminding them to stay calm. "No sudden moves," Jesse would say, in a voice barely above a whisper. Probably. We like to imagine that. The gang's actions made them famous and wanted across multiple states. Law enforcement was always on their tail, but Jesse was clever. He knew how to hide in plain sight, blend into crowds, and maybe grow a different mustache if needed. His reputation wasn't just about robberies. It was also about survival. Several members of the gang were killed or captured, but Jesse and Frank kept going, like stubborn tumbleweeds rolling across the plains. And so, the outlaw legend grew, slowly but surely. By the late 1870s, the James Younger gang had thinned out a bit. Some were arrested, some were shot. One probably just decided robbing trains wasn't worth the hassle and opened a feed store. After a botched raid in Northfield, Minnesota in 1876, everything changed. The gang tried to rob the First National Bank, but the town fought back. With bullets, lots of them. The raid failed. Most of the younger brothers were wounded and captured. Jesse and Frank escaped, barely, like two raccoons in the night, just trying to avoid the spotlight and the law. After that, Jesse became more cautious, which for him meant robbing fewer banks and spending more time pretending to be a normal citizen. He moved around with his wife, Z. Mims James, who was also his first cousin. Because apparently the family tree was more like a circle. They had 2 children. Jesse even tried going by fake names, like Thomas Howard, which sounds like someone who sells boots, not someone who robs trains. He settled for a time in Nashville, Tennessee. He lived in rented homes. He went to church. He probably ate stew and didn't talk about his past. But eventually, he got restless. He formed a new gang in the 1880s, a kind of James Gang 2.0, but with fewer trusted friends and more questionable applicants. These new recruits weren't like the old crew. They were ambitious, yes, but also nervous, and a little too interested in the reward money attached to Jesse's capture. And so we approach the final chapter, not with a dramatic gunfight or a high-speed chase, but with a house, a chair, and a coward. Because, as it turns out, betrayal doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes it just creeps in, like a draft under the door. Jesse James was tired. Tired of hiding. Tired of robbing. Tired of having to introduce himself as Mr. Howard, and then remembering that wasn't his real name. It was 1882. Jesse was living in St. Joseph, Missouri, under the alias again. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet you only get from faded wallpaper and secrets. He had brought in 2 new gang members, Robert and Charlie Ford, brothers, nervous. And not exactly the A-team. Robert Ford was young, ambitious, and very aware that the governor of Missouri had offered a $10,000 reward for Jesse James, dead or alive, which was a lot of money in those days, and honestly still a lot now. On the morning of April 3rd, 1882, Jesse was at home. He took off his guns, something he almost never did. He climbed a chair to dust a picture on the wall. Yes, dust. That's when Robert Ford shot him in the back of the head. It was quiet, sudden, and anticlimactic. Jesse died instantly, at age 34. Some said he knew it was coming. Others said he was betrayed by a friend. All we know is Jesse James was buried in Missouri. His epitaph read, "Murdered by a traitor and a coward whose name is not worthy to appear here," which is a strong opinion for a tombstone. Robert Ford collected part of the reward and became a minor celebrity, which didn't last. He was later shot and killed too, because karma doesn't run. It walks slowly, like a man in spurs. Jesse James became a legend. Stories claimed he faked his death, that he lived under another name, that he rode off into the sunset and opened a saloon. But no, he died in that quiet little house, betrayed by someone who smiled at his table. And that was the slow, slightly dusty life of Jesse James. an outlaw, a brother, a husband, and a man who should have let someone else do the dusting. Thank you for drifting through the dusty tale of Jesse James. If you made it all the way to the end, either you're incredibly relaxed or you're writing a paper on outlaws. Either way, I respect it. If this helped you fall asleep, consider subscribing. I promise not to yell. There are more slow stories to come, more lives to explore, more people who made choices. Some smart, some less smart. Until next time, rest easy, and maybe don't trust anyone standing behind you while you're dusting. Good night.